Hi, my name's Trav. Travelin' Trav, this particular manifestation of consciousness that I call me. Today, just for you, I've got this archetypal origin story of a slave boy who meets Mitch Mitchell, Noel Redding, and Jimi Hendrix. Also, we're going to work Dizzy Gillespie's A Night in Tunisia into the story. So cool. Have you ever taken a close look at the stories you are telling yourself? Deliverance from bondage and the long journey home afterwards is one of the great human stories. LNTEOW, labor and the expression of worth. Dep tribes feed the world, strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Together, we are discovering our common work, our common stories, and our common love. And now, it's time to start singing the trans-rational blues. Come on. There once was a slave boy. For many generations, his people had been in bondage. Every day, he went to shame school. Shame school taught him to self-hate. But the shame school was hardly necessary because the self-hate was already written into his DNA. By the time the slave boy was 12 years old, he felt very, very sad. One day, as his eyes filled with tears, he wished that he'd never been born, or rather, he wished that he could die. The slave boy felt a crushing hopelessness. Tears formed in his eyes one day as he bounced along on the clunky slave cart that took him to and from shame school. He shut his eyes so that no one would see his tears. The slave boy could hear many people in the marketplace, but he could not see them through his tears. He raised his eyes toward the sun, which was glinting through some trees. The glinting sun was orange and golden through his tears. The colors changed as he allowed the sun to peek through his eyelashes. Months passed like this. The boy's father, by slave tradition, was obligated to reinforce all the shame that he learned at school. Every day, the slave father yelled and screamed at the boy until he cried, again and again. The father meant no harm by his violence. He was only trying to help his son to understand his role in their shame-based system. The father was only giving his son the education that he'd received himself as a little slave boy. Sometimes the father felt very badly that his son was so sad. The slave father did not like to feel badly, so he screamed at his son more, demanding that he stop his crying. But the boy's tears did not stop, and this enraged the father. After months of frustration, the slave father finally said to the slave boy, "How could you do this to me?" The slave father continued, "Do you not understand the shame you bring on me with your tears? You little faggot! Why can't you be strong like me? Have I not shown you how to run with straight wrists? Have I not taught you how to hate the masters? Can you not see how much I love you?" The slave boy did not know what to say. The slave boy knew that there was nothing he could say that would stop what was about to happen next. And so, it happened again, and again, and again, and again. And the slave boy hated his father. And the slave father was ashamed of his son. The slave father loved his son so much. He could not understand why his son was so angry. "I will try to cheer him up," said the father. "I know just what I will do," he said. And so he grabbed his son by the arm, and off they went into the dark of the city. The boy had never been in the city at night. The father's pace quickened, and his grip on the boy's arm tightened as they wound their way through the narrowing passages. Warm lights radiated through the windows where slave families were all tucking themselves in for the night. But the boy was not being tucked in. He was being dragged through the streets by a father whose pace and intensity were increasing with every footstep. The boy had never seen his father quite like this before. As the father dragged his son forward, the slave boy became aware of a thrumming up ahead. It was a pulse unlike he'd ever heard. They turned several more corners. The The pulse became louder and louder. Now they stood just on the other side of a wall through which the pulse was emanating. "This is it," said the father. "Follow me." The father let go of his son's arm and led him through a door and ever closer to the pulsing sounds. The slave boy had never seen his father move so gracefully. He weaved his way through a crowd of people and closer still to the strange pulse of sounds. The slave father moved so quickly that he disappeared in the crowd. "That's okay," thought the slave boy. "I know what to do." The slave boy continued pressing through the crowd and toward the pulsing sounds. He was surprised to see his father now dancing wildly before a group of 3 men who each held strange sound tools in their hands. One of the men held sticks, and he was beating on animal skins that had been stretched over hollowed tree stumps. The other 2 men attacked tightly drawn strings drawn end to end on their own objects fashioned from trees. The slave boy's father convulsed with joy, pretending to have his own strong stick. To see his father like this was quite strange. The boy felt happy. When the 3 men finally stopped playing, the boy was surprised to see his father speaking with one of the music men. "Son," said the slave father, "I have talked with these men, and they have agreed to teach you." "Hi," said the one who played the loudest. "I'm Jimmy. This is Noel, and the guy who bangs the skins, that's Mitch." The men smiled at the slave boy, and the slave boy felt suddenly not so alone in their company. The slave boy looked around for his father, but his slave father was nowhere to be found. "Here," said Jimmy, as he handed the boy his stringed instrument. "Carry this for me." That was the last time the boy saw his father for many years. The instrument felt good in the boy's hands, balanced. Beginning in 1492, Europeans made an agreement with one another that genocide and slavery were an acceptable means by which to move into North America. The manifest destiny that was birthed by Empire Christianity absolutely ravaged the land and the people of North and South America. Some Americans, especially ones from the United States, like to tell this story that our Civil War brought an end to slavery. But that's just not true. We now live in a caramelized dystopian future which was created by a bloodthirsty Wetico spirit, that spirit which will devour and consume until nothing is left. What can we possibly do? There is happening now a great rising up of the spirit of love in the people. We have the power to resist our tyrannical government by coming together communally, celebrating life, and creating musical catharsis, artistic catharsis with one another. We can generate together a vision for our future, labor and the expression of worth, where we are aligning our efforts with what we know to have true value, labor and the expression of worth. Dep tribes feed the world. Strengthening a tribe member deepens the tribe. Together, we are discovering our common work, our common stories, and our common love. Travelin' Trav is a singer, songwriter, poet, essayist, metaphysical therapist, teacher, healer, father, and an advocate for the homeless and neurodivergent. He is an encourager, a deeply flawed human being, and a somewhat reluctant, yet grateful, follower of the one that we have called Jesus. Trav's working practice is now an integration of his diverse career experiences, which includes time in the military, police, academia, and physical therapy. His personal journey to overcome genetically inherited trauma makes him an expert on mental health issues and trauma recovery. Humanity is making the leap into the non-dual. We are moving beyond the binary into a more fluid state. This is evident in our most recent explorations of gender identification. In the depths of Christ, there is no male or female. Travelin' Trav is developing educational materials which encourage the alignment of our rational and mystical senses. These educational tools will help us to manage this species-wide transition in our consciousness.
Together, we are developing a new language to describe this caramelized, dystopian world in which we live. Because we are stumbling toward our next evolutionary threshold, we must learn to both sing the blues and transcend the oppression that inspired the blues in the first place. We rise above our tendency to manifest as either the oppressed or the oppressors. Labor and the Expression of Worth is Trav's compassionate philosophical container which creates the necessary inner space to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously. Labor and the Expression of Worth is a context in which we may align our work with one another around our deepest common values. We must educate, strengthen, and encourage one another. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Deep tribes can feed the world. It is essential that the consciousness level of our species is deepened. We need a new perspective from which to solve the diverse and many problems that humanity has created for itself. In order to raise our consciousness, we must encourage deep communication between the generations. Trav is reaching out to the generations who came before him and after him. Thank you for supporting Travel and Trav by contributing monthly through Patreon. Every little bit helps. May we discover our deepest common values together and align our efforts appropriately. The future of our species depends on it. Strengthening a tribe member deepens a tribe. Depth tribes feed the world. Sincerely, Travis Irwin.